So what's the point of doing all this? It can take like 100 points or 1,000 points. It reduces your problem to only 4 points. So you can reduce storage and complexity of manipulating large data sets. So this is how we tackle the problem. We start off with some data and overlay. We have 4 control points. We're going to set them. 2 of them are going to be fixed. We're going to set one at the beginning of our data, one at the end, and we're going to set one foot from the beginning of our data and 2 foot from the beginning of our data. So that's how we're starting with 4 control points. So typically, when we start with these 4 control points, we're going to create 3 sections of data, which will have varying amounts of distance between our data and our polynomial when we overlay our polynomial from our control points, passing through all the control points. We're going to have some distance between the data and the polynomial. So what we want to do, we want to reduce the distance between our discrete data and our polynomial. So here we have an illustration of our cubic sections. I highlighted like section 1, section 2, section 3. So I created a polynomial passing through all these control points. And this can alternate. The data could be above the polynomial or be below it. So we'll discuss that further in the other slides. So depending on the curve configurations, we have to know which way to move our control point to get a really good fit. So when the polynomial passes through the control points, it fits nicely around our data. So these are our configurations. We have 4 basic types, which we identified. So basically, if our curve is concave up or concave down, we could have our discrete data line above our polynomial, or discrete data line below our polynomial. For either case, either be concave up or concave down. So I'm going to show you in either situation what you're going to do to have a better fit. In this case, we're going to work looking at this area, and the curve is concave down, and the discrete data, this is this point, it lies above our polynomial, which we overlay for our control points. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this control point back or up to fit our discrete data. And this is what it does. Another situation where the curve is concave down, but this time the discrete data is below our polynomial. So what we're going to do, we're going to move this control point here, we're going to move it down. And we have a good fit. In this case, the curve is concave up, but our data lies above our polynomial. So what we want to do, we want to move this control point here, C2, we want to move it up to fit our data. And in the second case, where the curve is concave up, but in this time the data lies below our polynomial, so we want to move this control point here, we're going to move it down. So I presented these 4 cases. So basically, here's our approach to doing it. It's a basic algorithm of how we move, on the basis of how we move our control points. We start off by saying we're looking for some minimal amount of distance between our curve. I mean, identify that to be like 1. You can choose any factor you want. And we perform our concavity test. So based on our concavity test, we're going to know which way we want to move our curve. So what we do, we know we correctly want to move our curve. We move our curve and then we test the distance between our data and our curve. And if it's less than our minimum factor, we stop moving our control point. So that's basically the gist of it. And we have two methods of doing that. We can move one point at a time, which might take a little bit longer, or we can move by bisections. By bisections, I mean, imagine you have some minimum point and some maximum point. You want to move halfway between the minimum point at first, and if it's not enough, you want to move halfway again. So let me show you some of my results. I have some data. The blue line represents the discrete data, and the red line represents our original polynomial. That means that when we take our control points, starting from the beginning to 1/3 from the beginning, 2/3 from the beginning, and 1 at the end, that's a typical original polynomial that we get to fit our data. So what we want to do, what we did, we applied our algorithm on these two sections to reduce the distance between the discrete data and the polynomial. And some typical results, I'll show you in the next slide. That's what we got from it. It reduced the area between from the control point 1 to control point 2 and the endpoints. But as you can see, it created some area in between, like control point 2 and control point 3, that we'll have to reduce later on. So in the future, we want to find some more efficient way of moving our control point, besides moving it by singularly or by bisection. You want to move it proportional to the height, to the distance, and the width between control points. And we want to measure the complexity, computational complexity of doing all of our methods to create like a more definite mathematical model. Conclusion: from performing this, from applying these algorithms to section 1 and section 2, we can see that it does in fact minimize the distance between our discrete data and polynomial. So first off, I want to acknowledge Professor Simpson of our computer science department. He's the one who gave us the initial application where we could draw this, we could load discrete data, and we could use control points. And we just applied an algorithm to move the control points to minimize the distance between some sections. And secondly, in programming this, I used the C++ linear algebra library called Armadillo. This is their website. And I use it to like manipulate matrices. Do you guys have any questions?
I got one.